Hey, what's up, players? This is Shikaraganai, and we're going to do another video in our series, Pop, another server drop. And today, we're going to be popping Mr. Robot. So typically, I do my different Pop series using TryHackMe VMs. But for some reason, I couldn't get this one working on that platform. So I went ahead and just downloaded the OVA file, the VirtualBox one, from the VulnHub website. And I'll put a link to that in the description. And I set it up as a host only on the same network as my Kali instance here. So we're going to go ahead and just blast away at that particular one there. So when I do these boot to root type of scenarios, these capture the flags, the reason that I like to go a little bit more in depth than some is that I think it's a great way to learn, hacking techniques is hands-on, but also similar scenarios you may see out there. Now, a lot of CTFs are a little glamorized, and they're not necessarily, proof point of what really happens in the network all the time. But it does teach great concepts. It teaches methodology. So my goal with this series is to have them be self-contained. Whereas if I were to describe a technique or a command switch in a previous video in the series, I will do exactly the same thing again for this one, because I'm going under the assumption that this may be the first time you're watching these videos and you have not watched any of the previous ones. So I want to make sure that's verbose enough in these videos for that. So I typically like to go through and just kind of teach methodology and say, this is how I would approach attacking a particular server. And when I display different commands and different tools, I like to demonstrate and explain why I'm using certain switches, or why am I using this tool maybe over another, why is it in this part of the workflow, that kind of thing. So that's what these videos are typically about. So the Mr. Robot one is based off the TV show, Mr. Robot, and if you haven't seen that before, it's a hacking type of TV show. I would say out of all the movies and TV shows I've seen, it's the most accurate when it comes to like real world application and tools. Of course, a lot of it's glamorized, but there is real toolage being used there, such as the rubber ducky and Tor and all that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit more true to life than some of the other ones. So yeah, it's a good show for it. And the main character is Elliot, and the main bad guys are F Society, so they're the hacktivists in this case here. Well, I don't know if you call them bad guys or whatever, depending on what scope you're looking at, but that's the hacktivists in the show. So let's go ahead and rock into it. Now, this Dratus project that I have here is something I'm probably going to do another video about. And I'm going to start implementing it so that I don't have to type as much. But I make use of their methodologies page. But this is called the Dratus Community Edition. There is a paid version that's a lot more involved, has a lot more stuff to it. But this does good for me to make a checklist of sorts and be able to copy and paste commands fairly quickly. And I think it would be pretty cool for you to go ahead and use something like this yourself when you're doing CTFs, so that you won't have to remember, okay, what was that Durbuster command I did? What was that Gobuster command I did? You can have it all at the tip of your hands here, and that's what I'm doing with this. So under methodologies, and again, I'll do another video that just kind of describes what and how to install this particular thing. So I have a CTF cheat sheet, and for instance, to find our vulnerable machine, I'm going to go ahead and use an Nmap Arp Scan. So I'm going to add more to my Nmap here. I don't have very many on this one right now, but I'm constantly adding more. So this is pretty cool where I can just go to it and I can just go ahead and copy and paste the actual commands. So it's a lot easier for me. So let's get started on popping this bad boy. First, we'll show you here that the IP address range that I'm in, so when we do our Arp Scan, is that I'm on the 192.168.56, which is the default host-only network for VirtualBox. And you can see that I'm on 101. Okay, so my guess is that the Mr. Robot VM is on .102, but let's just go ahead and verify as we do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and paste this in, and I'll explain kind of what Nmap is if you're not familiar with the tool after I run this. Whoops, actually I have to rerun it because I put the wrong subnet in. There we go. Let's try that again. So Nmap is for doing port scanning. That's the main function that it has. It has some scriptability to it where you can add scripts into it to further its function as more of an exploit tool as well. And if you're not familiar with ports, ports are the entry point essentially into our computer. And you would typically find, let's just say, an unencrypted web server would be hosted on port 80. So requests come from me to the server into port 80. So that's kind of the entry point into it. There's 65,536 ports, because you consider 0 to be a number in this case. So the first 0 through 1023 are considered to be well-known ports, ones that are already known, such as port 22 for SSH, port 80 for HTTP, that sort of thing. And then from there, up until, 49,000 something is what they call registered ports. So those would be things like if you have a specific tool, like Cisco maybe has a specific application or function, and it has a particular port that it's assigned with IANA specifically for that. It's called a register port. Then after the 49,000 on up, you would then find what's called dynamic ports, and these are created whenever I make a request to a web server. So when I type in google.com and hit enter, it's coming out of my computer on a randomized port, that's up in that range, to port 443, port 80, whatever it is for Google. So this will scan open ports and tell us some information about what's running on those ports. In this case, what I'm doing is an Arp Scan. An Arp is essentially a broadcast. If I had 5 computers in a network, okay, and I wanted to ask, hey, what's your IP address? What's your MAC address that's assigned to it? It does an ARP broadcast saying, hey, I'm blah, blah, blah. Who is blah, blah, blah? That's me trying to find other computers. So this is me searching my network and seeing if there's any other computers on there. And the one that I'm interested in, more than likely the one I'm thinking it is this 102.1 right there. Okay, so we can assume that's our victim machine. So we're going to run an Nmap scan. I'm going to run it, then I'm going to explain what I've typed in for switches, because again, I'm trying to teach methodology, not just script kiddie garbage where, hey, just type in what I type and hit enter and you don't know what it's doing, or any of that kind of garbage. So let me go ahead and put this bad boy in, and then I'll explain it as we go. So we need an IP address. We know it's 192.168.56.102. Okay. So the TAC-N, when I say TAC, that means a dash. TAC-N in this case means don't do DNS resolution, because I don't really need it for this thing that I'm doing right now. And it speeds it up just a slight bit. Then you have a dash capital PN. That one is for not doing any pings. And the reason for that is sometimes your Nmap scans will fail if the server you're trying to reach out to disables ICMP. So to get around that problem, I just disable pinging. I just say, don't ping. We already know the actual address. We have an idea of what the address is. So then the rest of it, let me scroll back up here. The TAC capital A is called an aggressive scan. And what it does is it combines 4 things into that scan. So one, it combines an S capital V scan, which means version scan. And what that does is says, okay, I found port 80 and I want to find out exactly what version of software is running on port 80. So it would say Apache 2. Blah, 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 right? That's being used with a text file with probes. Don't worry about that. I have another video specifically about Nmap I would reference you to for that. The next thing it runs is TAC capital O, which is for operating system scan, to try to determine what operating system it's seeing. And then there's S capital C, which is the default script scan. So Nmap comes with a scripting capability with a .nsc file, and there's multiple different categories. And the reason they break it up into those categories is because some of them can be intrusive and actually take down a network, and that may not be what you want. So you look for safer ones, things like that. What the S capital C does is it takes the default category, and all the scripts that are in the default category, it runs those. And then it ends up with a trace route as the very last thing. Okay, so it's a pretty noisy scan. So if you're looking for stealth, this isn't your Huckleberry. But we're just using it to get a lot of information all in one go for that. So we look here at the results, and we can see it found port 22, but it found it was closed. Port 80 looks like it's open, and 443, and that looks about it. All right, so now we know that. Let's jump on over. And let's go ahead and take a peek at the actual web page, right? We'll start off there. So 192.168.56.102. All right. Oh, look at that. It's a pretty sweet looking web page. Looks like a little terminal access. Nice. Very flashy. Cool. So we are now, let's see. If I haven't explained it yet. Okay, a bunch of wordiness. and so on and so forth. All right, so I'll let it do its thing and run. And what we're trying to do in this case is we're trying to see if there's any other directories that would go here. Like for instance, I would imagine if I type in the fsociety command here, it would take us to that. So fsoc. Okay. Oh, nice. Look at that. Freaking me out. Freaking me out, man. Okay, so up here we can see there's a directory that it went to /fsociety. So I would assume that it has some other directories in there that are maybe hidden and I don't know about that I would like to try to find. To do that, use what they call directory busting. Popular tool would be Gobuster, but I find that Gobuster, another tool, is a little bit faster for me. It seems on a more constant basis. So I'm going to go back to my sweet little Dradis project here, my checklist. And let's see, we're looking for directory busting, and right there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do the Gobuster one. So in this particular case, what this will do is it will search in the directory or search for a directory because it has other functionality. The TAC-U means it's the URL. The TAC-W is for the word list of the word you want to insert as a path to see if it actually comes up with a 200 OK or not. Then after that, the TAC-X we're not going to use right now, but this would be allowing me to specify an extension that I'm looking for. So that'd be handy for things like ink files, things like that. But for now, I'm just going to grab this portion here, and we're going to see if there's any other good stuff on it. All right, so I need to change the IP address right here, the URL. So we'll go ahead and put in the 192.168.56.102 / and we're saying take the words from this word list that I've listed. In each word, I want you to insert quickly into this path and try to connect and see if it gets a 200 OK. So we'll hit enter and let that thing roll. So while it's doing its business, another common thing that we would do when we visit a website is see if they have a robots.txt file. Now, we all know that Google and Bing and all these other search engines and such have these crawlers that will go out and index things on the surface web. And if it indexes your website, it may index all the paths and all the different paths that you have there. And there's some that you may not want to be indexed or searchable. So you'll make a robots.txt file and you'll put it into your root of your web server, and you'll say which paths you want to disallow, saying don't index these. Now those are a particular interest to the bad guy because why aren't you indexing them, right? Do you have something there to hide? Is there some other goodies under there that we like to see? So we typically, as hackers, would look for robots.txt to see if there's any other interest in the information. So let's see if they have it. Now, keep in mind, not every website is going to have this, but the ones that do, we can query. So let's see if they actually have one here. And they do. All right, let me increase that. So we can see here that there's a couple different things. Now, this is a capture the flag, so we obviously see right here, this is our first flag. So if you're doing a try hack me or something else and you want to get your first flag, just copy this and put it right here in this path, and should give you first flag. Bang! Just like that, okay? So that's good. Now this one here, the DIC extension, I would assume this is probably a dictionary file of some sort. Probably can be used for password cracking if we need it later. So let's go ahead and download that. So we'll put it here at the extension end here and hit enter. Now I've already saved my file to a location under the Try Hack Me Mr. Robot folder that I have. So I'm not going to save it, but this is what you would do. You would save this dictionary file in this case here. Now I did a little preparation before this for this particular video, and I noticed that the password cracking that we're going to do later did take a long time with that file. So to avoid having to cut video and pause, I just took the password and any lines around it and compiled that into its own dictionary file just to speed things up. But you would use this one here for any password cracking. Okay. All right, let's go back and take a peek here at. I'm going to Control-C out of this and see if there's anything good here. Oh, look at that, WordPress. So they're using WordPress. That's a good thing for us because typically those are full of different vulnerabilities such as the plugins and such. But they also have some ways to break in using a web shell, a reverse web shell. So we'll probably tackle that. So let's go check out the WP logon page, and let's see what we see. All right, cool. So we actually have this particular one here, and we can see there's a username and a password. Now, for me, what I like to do is I like to try to save a little time, be a little efficient, and if I can find the username first and then do a password crack just for the password, I would like that. Because this is based off the TV show, Mr. Robot, we can assume possibly the usernames could be like Tyrell, Elliot, Darlene, right? Those characters from the show. So what we're going to do in this case is I'm going to try to figure out the username first, then we'll go ahead and do password cracking after that. To do that, I'm going to use a tool called Burp Suite, which, if you do web application pen testing, is kind of the de facto tool that most people use. I'll do another video on this in particular, but just know that it's an interceptor. So in other words, if I request a page from this web page here to a server, I can have it stop here first, and I can modify and screw around with it and then send it onto the server. So it's between my request and the actual server. It sits between that as a proxy. So that's what we're going to use here for this particular one, and I'm going to intercept the login. So I'm just going to make up some crap here. So we'll say Leroy for the name, and then Jenkins for the password. Leroy Jenkins! Check out YouTube. Wow. Leroy Jenkins for that. Pretty funny stuff. And so I got my intercept on, so I'm going to submit. All right, so here we can see that the request is a post request, sending out the credentials Leroy and Jenkins. I'm going to send this over to a tool called the Intruder. By the way, I'm using the free version of Burp Suite here, so you do not need the pro version for this. I'm going to turn the intercept off, and I'm going to head over to the Intruder. So let me tell you what our goals are here. I'm going to clear all annotations that we see. Our goal is to try to find the username off of a list that I will supply. Now, I could essentially just go ahead back to the web login page and try every single username and manually type it in, or I could just go ahead and give it a list and have it do it fairly quickly, and that way I can kind of see, is there any differences between the requests? So we want to screw around with this value here. We want to insert the words I give it in the payload into that position. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Add up on the top right side of Burp, and you can see it puts a little annotation thing around it, and that's our Huckleberry right there. I'm going to keep it on sniper mode and move to payloads, and under here we'll just add some names. So Tyrell is a character on the show, Darlene, and normally you would have a list, a massive list that you would input here, but just for demonstration purposes, I'm just screwing around with some of these. Elliot, right? Elliot's the main character. We'll put him in there. Okay, that's good enough for now. So we'll just use 3. You're probably thinking, well, you could have just gone back there, player, and did it that way. But I want to show you some of this Burp Suite coolness stuff. So let's click Start Attack. It's the free version, so it just gives you a warning about throttling. All right, so we are done. So it looks like, if you look at the length, here's what's odd, is you see the byte size, and we see 4077 on these two, but this one's different, which tells me the response has a different text. What I'm looking for is if a web server admin has created a login form page and they do it incorrectly, and what I mean by that is the response code's back. If somebody were to say, put in a username and then just some dumb random password, and they hit submit and it says invalid password, one can assume they got the right username. And that's how a lot of people will go ahead and try to enumerate users in your company, is they'll go ahead and do that a tactic on a login page. Now, the best way, obviously, to mitigate that is a generic error message that says invalid login altogether, right? Something like that. In this case, I'm guessing that the first two here will have an invalid username error, and then the third one, Elliot, will likely have an invalid password one if they're bad admins in that case there. Or I won't say bad, but uneducated admins when it comes to this. All right, so we can see here by going to the response. Let's take a look here. Scroll down a little further. Okay, there we go. Error right there. Invalid username, okay? So we can see that's obviously telling us that it's invalid username. If I go to the Elliot one, though, and look at the response, you'll notice that it says the password you entered for the username is incorrect. So that tells me Elliot's a username. So we now know that. Let's blast on over here back to our blog. And we now know that the username in this case is Elliot. Now, what we can do is use another tool, because this is a WordPress site. So there's another tool called Wordpress Scan or WPScan that will allow us to do things like that. So let's go back to my little cheat sheet over here. And let's go down to my WordPress one. There it is. All right, so let's see. Enumerate users. We don't need to do that because we already know it. Okay, here we go. Password cracking where the username is known. So that's what we have. That's our Huckleberry right there. All right, so let's grab all of this, copy that over, and we're going to populate that. And I'll explain it here in just a moment while I run it. So I'm going to come back first and change the URL, because it is going to be the WordPress login page. So let's go ahead and copy that URL for that, which is here. Copy that, and we'll paste it on right there. The Txt in this case here means threads, and I'm setting 50 threads. The TAC capital U indicates I know the username, and here it is. And the TAC capital P is a password file that I'm going to insert here. Now you remember that we used robots.txt, and we found that had the fsociety.dic file. I told you that I had actually converted that into a smaller file just for demo purposes for this video, so I don't have to cut the video or pause it. So we're going to point to that particular file. So we'll say /root try hack me. It's the Mr. Robot page, and I think I called it new something. There it is. So new fsociety.dic. This is what it's going to use for it. Let's hit enter. All right, starting at scan, it's checking the plugins that are there by default and seeing if there's any type of vulnerabilities detected with it. And let's see, pop. Let me see here. Oops, you know what I didn't do? I didn't put Elliot's name in. It said Wingnut. Can't have that. There we go. All right, let's put the real one in. So we'll say Elliot, and we'll see if that works. Sorry about that. I'll keep my mistakes in so you guys can see. All right, look at that. Pop. Loving it. We see password right there for Elliot. Awesome. All right, so let's log in then. Seems we have the password now. Don't forget, we already have one flag. There's 3 altogether, so that's what we're looking to gain here. All right, let's come back here to the username. So we'll say Elliot for username and password. Paste that in, and let's go ahead and log in. Now, this may be an older version of WordPress. I'm not sure how old this VM is, but it'll be very similar to what you'll see normally. So under Appearance, if you go down to Editor, okay, you can see there's a bunch of templates here. Now, the one we're going to really focus on is the 404 template, okay? And the 404 template is something that we're going to swap out with something else. Now, there is a location that is in Kali that has some different web shells that we can use. So under my WordPress one, I did some instructions for me just to be quick about to copy and paste and all that stuff. This is where it is in Kali, USR share web shells, PHP, and there's a PHP reverse shell right there. What you would do is you would say CP for copy, and then this path, and then where you want it to go. I've already done that, and I put it in my Try Hack Me one. And so let's go ahead and navigate over to there. So we'll say CD, Try Hack Me, and Mr. Robot. And there we go. So we have PHP reverse shell that I've copied over to there. Now, something that you have to do with this particular script from Pentest Monkey is you have to actually change 2 different variables. You have to change the IP address and the port number you want to listen to. The idea of what we're trying to do is we want the actual reverse shell to be placed on the WordPress page. We want to trigger that to run, and then we're going to have a listener set up on our attack machine to receive that request, thus giving us shell access to that victim computer. That's the goal. And we can attain that goal by this reverse shell. So what we need to do is put in our IP address and a port number that we'll make up, okay? So I'm going to use Nano, and you can use Vi, whatever. I don't want to get involved in that war. But let's go ahead and nano or edit this file. So when you first edit it, you'll see if you scroll down that it says right here, change this and change this. So this is the right IP address that I have. This is my attack machine, my Kali instant. This is not the web server. And then I just picked a random port of 9200. Okay. Now I've already run this before, so it's already populated here, but it will show something different. When you're done with that, then if you use a nano, you'll do a Control X, a Y, then Enter. Okay. I didn't change anything, so I just did Control X. Now what we want to do is, shoot, I shouldn't have closed that. I kind of needed that information, but what we'll do is we'll just leaf pad it. So I'll grab leaf pad and we'll just open that up because we want to copy the contents of that reverse shell that's there. Okay. So we'll go ahead and select all. I'll copy it. Let's pop on over now to the victim WordPress site. And what we're going to do is we've picked the 404 template. We're going to go ahead and remove all of that. And we're going to put in our PHP code. Now verify, always verify at the very top that it does have that PHP beginning portion right here. Once you verified that, go ahead and scroll down and click on Update File. Okay, so we've now updated the file successfully. We're good to go. So what we're going to do is come over here and we're going to start up our own reverse shell listener using a tool called Netcat, which is a good tool to connect with TCP and UDP and such. So I'm going to say NC for the name of the tool for Netcat. I'm going to say TAC N for no DNS resolution, L for listen in mode that's not persistent, V for verbose, and P for port. And we're going to say 9200, which is the port I had made on the reverse shell script that we modified. I'm going to hit enter and it's just going to sit here listening, saying, hey, player, what's going on? Give me some goods, right? And so we need to trigger that to happen here. Now to do that, we know this is a 404 template, so it will be triggered and pulled into the WordPress site when we try to navigate to a page that doesn't exist. I'm almost confident there's no page on this called doofus, so let's go ahead and use that just for giggles here. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll to this, and I'm going to say doofus because I'm assuming it's not there, and I'll hit enter. So because it's not there, it will give a 404, thus run the shell, thus pop it, pop, pop, pop. Loving it right there. Okay, so we can see here that we actually do now have a connection to this server. Now what we actually have here is something that they call a TTY type of scenario. And in the full write-up for this demo that I have on my website, I go into a little more detail about what it is and what it has to do with old school terminals, computer terminals from back in the day when we had the terminals for the network community, sending things like escape codes to a terminal, those sort of things. But in summary, or layman's terms, let's just say that this prompt that I'm in currently could be unstable, and doing some control C's or something like that could just remove me completely from it. So I want a more stable shell. To do that, I can go ahead and import it with Python. So we're going to go here to our sweet little Dradis project, and I have one in particular for the Python TTY shell. Okay, this is typically being used to give us a more secure, stable shell. Not secure, but stable. All right, so let's pop that in there, hit enter, and you can see that the shell prompt has changed to something a little bit different. Now, when you first break into a Linux machine, a wise thing to do is to do ID to find out, you know, if what group we're in, right? If we're 0, which is root, or for something else. And you can also run who am I and see that we are daemon, okay? So in this case here, let's go ahead and let's navigate to the home folder because we're looking for another flag, right? I mean, that's kind of our goal here. So let's see who we got. Okay, so we have a robot user. So let's go ahead and CD over to that. And the tab complete doesn't seem to work in these shells. So, all right, so we have key2-of3.txt. There's our second flag. And password.raw.-md5. So first, let's go ahead and try to view the key or the flag. So we'll say key-2-of-3.txt. All right, it says permission denied. So let's do an ls, which means list directory, tac l, which gives us a little bit more verbose information. And we can see why we can't read it. If you're not familiar with permissions, I have a video on just Linux, and I would recommend you guys viewing that to learn a little bit more about it, but just short-term summary here. these are what they consider permissions. And there's 3 sections of it. You have the owner of the file, you have the group of the whoever you're assigning this to, and then everyone else. We fall under everyone else because we're not robot. Okay. So in this case, the way it breaks up is you have 3 different permissions. Read, which is R, W, which is write, X, which is execute. And you would see it in sections like this. So RW dash means the owner, in this case, because of this position, has read-write capability but not execute. The group has read capability and the everyone else has read capability. But you notice the file we tried to do, only the owner, robot, has read capability. So that's why we got permission denied. But we do see this password MD5, so that's possibly a way to find another user. Yeah, let's go ahead and try. Maybe robot, I think. It's probably his password. And MD5 is a hash. Typically what happens when you store credentials of anybody on a machine, they'll typically hash it. MD5 is not preferred because it has what they call collision issues. And raw MD5 is definitely not preferred because it's only 32 characters and it's pretty weak in that case. But salted MD5 is a little bit better because you can add a randomness to it, some entropy as it were. But let's go ahead and cat the password here. So we'll say cat password dot raw dash MD5. Now if you were to look at this string right here, if you were to count that, you would find 32 characters because that's what MD5 is. SHA-1 is 40 characters and so on. So we already know it's raw MD5 because, well, that's the name of the file. And we can see the username is robot. So what you would do is you would copy this off, and we're going to password crack this with a tool called John the Ripper. Now, we can feed it a text file with this username pass hash combination. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to go ahead and say, and by the way, I can't do it in this screen because this is the machine I'm broken into. So I have to go back to my attack machine, which is not that one. So let me open up another terminal. And we'll say nano, and I'll say my hash.txt. Okay? And then there, I'm going to go ahead and paste in that combination, username and hash. Okay? So now we have that listed in root. That's where that's located at. So let's go ahead and use John the Ripper. So we'll say John, and we'll say, well, actually, you know what? Why am I typing, right? I go back to my super sweet Dratus and just copy it from there, right? So we'll go to password crack in. Let's see. Okay, there's a John one right there. And this one specifically is for raw MD5. Awesome. All right, so let's copy that over and let me explain what's going on. All right, so we have the word list, TAC word list. That's pretty obvious. It points to a word list. In Kali Linux, there's a pretty massive one called rocku.txt that a lot of people use, so we'll keep that. -- format, let's see, format equals raw-MD5. That is correct from what we understand from the title. But if you were doing like a Windows machine one, it would be like NTLM would be the format, something like that. So in this case, the name of the file is called myhash.txt, so we are good to go. Let's hit enter, and let's see what happens. Loaded 1 password hash. All right, so let's see. We'll do John, show myhash.txt. No passwords cracked. Interesting. It did load that 1 password, and we have it in there. Let's see here. Okay, so I did a quick pause just to verify something. So in this case, yeah, I was kind of curious. Why would that not bring it up? It's because in the previous time I had actually run this as to check, make sure everything worked right before I did the video of it. And when you use John the Ripper, there's a file called john.pot, which includes all the cracked hashes that have been done so far. So instead of clearing it all out, the pot file, I'll just show you here. So you can see here that C3FCD blah 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 right there. You notice here that's the same file. Okay, so previously it had been cracked, and I'm surprised that the show didn't show it. But either way, this is the actual password. So in other words, I did this previously before this video was made, and it still had it in this one here. I didn't reset my VM to an earlier time. That's why it's showing there. So that's why the command didn't work then. But that's the proper steps to do it. if you've never cracked it before. And then we'll insert it into here. So we now know this is the actual password that we're looking for on this one. All right, so now that we've done that, and I'll keep all these in there, man, because, you know, hey, you got to show whenever you make mistakes too, right? So in this particular case, we know that's the password. Now, what we can do is we're logged in right now as, who are we? Damon, right? So what we can do is we can try to go ahead and switch user to robot, because now we know robot's password. So we'll say SU to switch user, and then we'll say robot, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to cat the second password file right here, right there. But we can't do it unless we're a robot, right? So we're going to go ahead and sue robot. It's going to ask for the password, and that's going to be this one right here. Okay. And we'll go ahead and paste that in there. Boom, there we go. So now if I say, who am I? Bada bing, bada boom, right there. We got robot. So now I should be able to cat this particular file. Let me do a pwd, make sure I'm in the right directory. I am. And let's go ahead and cat key -2-of-3.txt. Bing, there you go. All right, so we've done pretty well so far. Now, if I did an ID, I'm probably guessing he's not root. Okay, so if I do an ID, I notice that this cat is not root. And I would assume the last flag would be root. And that's kind of our huckleberry. That's what we're shooting for in that case. So what we can do in this case is try to elevate our privileges now to root with Linux. One way you can do that is you can do something they call a SUID bit, S-U-I-D. It's similar to saying run as, like if you're familiar with Windows stuff, when you right-click something and say run as admin. It's similar to that, where I can make a file that I've made, and I can say that any user on this system can run that program as if it were me, okay? In this particular case, what we need to do is search for anything that would have a SUID bit set. And that bit would be a number 4 would be an indicator of 1. 4000 is another indicator for SUID bit in that case. There's also a S, or a capital S, I'm sorry, that would show up in the permissions. So instead of the RW right there, instead of that RW dash, it would be RW capital S it would have in there. So let's do a search for that. To do that, we can use a find command in Linux. So let's go down through here and let's see. I think I have one just for bash general. Yep. Oh, I didn't include that in there. That's all right. Let's go down to exploits. And that wouldn't be the one I'm looking for either. I got to remember exactly what I'm doing with these, right? Here we go, privilege escalation. So this would be an example of one way to do it. So in this one here, the find command is built in to Linux. Slash indicates I want to start my search at the very top of the file system. Dash perm means permission. In this case, dash 4000 would indicate the SUID bit, S-U-I-D. Then dash type, F means file, that we're looking for a file. And then the 2 bracket dev/null will take all the garbage output, the errors or the things that's not really relevant data for us, and throw it into what they call a garbage can, if you will, a garbage collector that pushes it into dev null. All that basically adds to the deal that we're doing here is I don't see a lot of verbose error garbage that is irrelevant to what I'm looking for. I just want to find every single file from the top of the file system that has the SUID bit set. So let's do that. And what we're looking for is something that may be odd, that's not normally set to SUID. So let's go ahead and come back to the victim machine. There we go. And let's do a find. Now what I mean by an odd man out one, a typical one that we would see that uses the SUID bit would be passwd. So whenever a user, a standard user, wants to change their password, the passwd has to be run as root. So in order for a standard user to use the passwd command to actually change their password, it has to have the ability to run passwd as root. So therefore, it sets a SUID bit on that particular one. So let's take an example of that. So you see right there where it says user bin passwd right here. If I were to ls-tac-l that, whoops, I'm sorry, ls-tac-l and user bin passwd, you'll notice right here is an interesting S that's listed right there. So the owner in this case is root. So the owner has this set of permissions. If they set the executable portion to S, I'm sorry, I thought it was a capital S, I guess it's a lowercase s. If they set it to S, that means they're setting the SUID bit, meaning that it's not just an executable, it means that anybody can run this particular tool as root. So that's a common one we see. Ping's common, SU is common. Okay, so this one is not common. So Nmap, run an Nmap as sudo privileges, and by sudo we're talking about the, I'm sorry, not sudo, SUID. This is basically saying that we can run this as root. And if we can run that as root, that means we can probably look to see what version it is and possibly use something they call interactive mode on Nmap. So in that particular case, there's a version of Nmap from 2.0.2, I'm sorry, 2.02 to 5.21. If they're using that version, you can get into what they call interactive mode, which allows us to run like some commands. And what we could do is, because we're running it as root, we can do another command called !sh to drop into a bash shell. We're just telling it to run into a shell. And hopefully that would run us in as a shell as root. So that's what we're trying to do here. All right, so to take advantage of that, hope that made sense there, we're going to run user local bin nmap. So let's copy that. We're going to actually run that executable. And we're going to run it with the txt interactive. Now, if it doesn't allow it to happen, that means it's not that versions that, that have that capability. All right, so this one does have that capability, as we can see, and it does put us into interactive mode. Now, keep in mind, don't forget, we're currently still 100 something. We're standard user. We're not root, which is 0. That's what we're looking for, is the number 0. So if we do exclamation point sh and hit enter, it drops into this little prompt here. If we do an ID, look at that. Right here you can see, right there, pop, 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 another server drop. So we are now root access on Mr. Robot. And because we are root access, I'm assuming there's probably the third flag in the root folder. So let's go ahead and navigate over to /root ls, and looky there, key 3 of 3. So we'll say cat key -3 of -3 .txt, pop, 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 another server drop, and we now have full compromise of all 3 keys on Mr. Robot. So we learned quite a bit of things today. We learned the basic scanning with Nmap. We learned some directory busting with Gobuster. We learned some password cracking with John the Ripper and using dictionary files. We learned how to use password cracking with Wordpress for WordPress scan. We learned about the SUID bit for privilege escalation and the interactive mode of Nmap. And I think we had a pretty full gamut of different techniques for hacking today for Mr. Robot. So that'll be it for today's lesson. And look for some future other ones that we're going to be doing for the series Pop, 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 another server drop. For now, peace out, players.